Now, when I say to not hang your hat on the numbers, what I'm talking about are those of you, and you know who you are, who literally just go by the numbers to determine how you're feeling. And that's not the right way to do it. And to determine whether or not you're optimized. And that's not the right way to do it. We want to always ask those four important words. How do you feel? Because that is going to tell us what your progress really is. Now, granted, I'm going to break these down. We're going to look at your numbers. We are going to look at your thyroid and hormone lab values. We're going to look at insulin, and we're going to say, are they way, way off? Okay, well, if they're wackadoodle off, then there's the answer to how you're actually doing. And each number means something different. So if your free T3 is super, super low and it's not anywhere near the optimal range, and you did not go more than 24 hours between taking your last dose of anything with T3 in it and getting your labs done, then that's a huge sign that it's the T3 that's the problem and causing your symptoms. Then moving on, if we look at reverse T3, if that's elevated, if that's above a 12, then your brakes are on. That's going to be a huge indicator of why you are feeling the way you're feeling, why you're not losing weight, et cetera, all of those symptoms you're dealing with. Those two numbers, if they're screaming at us, obviously we're going to stop and go, hey, that's why you're still experiencing symptoms. That's why you don't feel so great. But we don't hang our hat on the numbers, because what if those numbers are darn near optimal? What if your reverse is below a 12? What if your free T3, when you left, let's say 24 hours, let's say that free T3 is like a 3.2. Well, my God, 24 hours, no meds, and you're coming in at a 3.2. That's pretty darn good. But yet you still are experiencing all of the symptoms. Then we have to look further. How's your insulin? Is that below a 6? How are your sex hormones? Are those in the tank? Are they in the absolute basement? Well, if they are, that's going to be a pretty big factor. But we don't want to hang our hat on the numbers, meaning, and I'm going to pull in the antibodies here. Many of you get hung up on your thyroid antibodies. You go, oh my God, they raised by 200 points from the last time I tested. You go, okay, well, so they raised. Were you glutened at a restaurant? Did you eat gluten like willingly because you were in kind of a screw it mode? Are you under a lot of stress? Did you just get over a cold, a virus? All of those can bump up your antibodies. We know that getting the shot that is out right now raises antibodies, as does even being in a workplace or home environment with people who did. If you want to reference, if you want to know more about what I'm referencing, go back and listen to, oh gosh, I couldn't even tell you the podcast episode. It's with Dr. Lisa O, and we are talking about her experience of having antibodies that were 3,800. And it's just craziness. So go back and listen to that. But there are many factors that raise your antibody levels. But here's the thing. If you feel good, I don't care if your antibodies went up by a couple hundred. Maybe you need to reel it in. Maybe you need to be more careful of where you eat out. Maybe you need to get rid of the gluten. Maybe you need to get rid of the gluten-free products because they're cross-reacting and bumping up your antibodies. It could become a problem because the more antibodies you have, the more soldiers you have, but we're not going to hang our hat and determine how your progress is going based on antibodies alone. And that's what I mean by we don't hang our hat on your numbers. Listen, I have had, and I talk about this, and it's very few and far between. I mean, it's like 1 out of every 1,000 people that I see, but I have had patients who are on T4 only, and they're doing pretty well. Maybe they're on T4 only because they couldn't tolerate T3 and we had to do workarounds, but we got them to an optimized point on T4 only. Now, would I hang my hat on their numbers of looking and going, man, okay, yeah, Your free T3 here is only saying a 2.7, but you're telling me that you're great, then I don't hang my hat on your numbers. As long as your symptoms are gone, are down, are moving in the right direction, then we can't diagnose you or say how you're doing based on your antibody level, based on your numbers, because you have to say how you're doing. You are the only person that can determine your progress. Now let's do a flip, right? Let's say those antibodies are at 0. You've done all the right things to get those antibodies down. The numbers, they look good. They're optimal, but you're still experiencing symptoms. Then we need to dig a little bit further. Of course, yes, I'm going to look at insulin. I'm going to look at your hormones. We're going to look at how you're eating. Did you get into screw it syndrome again? Or did you get into the it's not fair stage of hypothyroidism where you're like, this isn't fair that I have to monitor my food so much and I can't go out and have drinks with my friends without gaining a couple of pounds. I get it. It's not fair stage. Now, ultimately, once we optimize you, you can get away with a little bit more. But just like I was telling a patient today, I can't go on vacation and expect to have the sweet potato fries one night, have a burger the next night, even if it's a gluten-free bun, and then have a couple of glasses of wine and have a little treat here and there and eat out literally every single day. I can't do that and expect to not gain weight. I'm going to gain weight. Even though my thyroid's optimized, I'm going to still gain weight. So there is still that it's not fair stage. I've come to terms with it. I know that I can't eat like Susie Q, who doesn't have a thyroid problem. I know that. And I know that if I go off the rails, I'm going to gain weight. I'm not going to blame it on needing more thyroid hormone. I'm not going to blame it on my hormones. I'm going to blame it on myself because I went on vacation and I knew full well that if I do a little bit of this and a little bit of that, the weight's going to come on. Same thing with even just day-to-day living. If you're living day-to-day and let's say things came up, you're in a stressful situation, you're taking care of sick kids, taking care of sick parents, whatever it might be, you might have gone off your nutrition plan that was working and let a few other things slip in. And if that's occurring, then that might be the answer. Not necessarily the numbers, not your dose, but your own behaviors. We don't hang our hat on your numbers one way or the other. We don't hang our hat on your numbers if you feel like absolute garbage, but your numbers look good. We don't hang our hat on your numbers if you feel great, but your numbers are a little bit wonky. I'm not going to change anything. The old philosophy of if it ain't broke, don't fix it applies here. Because if you're feeling good, I'm not going to say, oh, well, Mary, your thyroid antibodies went up by 200. You must be feeling like garbage right now. And Mary goes, no, I feel great. I'm not going to tell Mary to feel like garbage based on a little bit of movement of antibodies. We might talk about Mary's behaviors and see if she's letting some gluten slip in, see if she's under a lot of stress, see if she had a virus, maybe check some, CBC with DIF, CMP, do some basic labs. But I'm not going to tell Mary to feel bad based on numbers. Just like flip side, I'm not going to tell you that you're normal. I will never, ever tell you that you're normal and everything is fine, air quotes. If you're listening to this as a podcast, everything is fine, Mary. Go on, go about your merry way. No pun intended. Because that's exactly what all of you have dealt with. That's what I dealt with when first getting diagnosed. So I'm certainly not going to do that. If you have symptoms, we listen, we dig deeper. We pay attention to the minute differences in those numbers. But if you feel great, don't panic if your free T3 went down by 0.2 points. Don't panic if your antibodies went up by 200, 300, 500. Antibodies fluctuate. Don't panic if your insulin went from a 4 to a 7. I've had a 7 insulin before. Yeah, it's after Christmas. Don't hang your hat on your numbers, but pay attention to them and pair them up with how you feel. Then move forward. If you're feeling great, then awesome. Good for you. Don't change anything. if you feel like garbage and your numbers, according to your doctor, are normal and everything's fine, then move on from that doctor until you find answers. Use those labs as a guide. They are a vital piece of information. They're a fantastic nugget to give us direction of which way to go with your health and with your treatment plan. But if you, almost like a psychology thing, if you look at those numbers, you go, well, Dr. Amie said I have to be at this number to be optimal. So obviously I must feel like garbage. No, go by how you feel, not by what I say all the time. Listen to most of what I say, not everything. No, go by how you feel. It's all about you. It is about you as a person, as a unique individual. And that's how I treat every single one of my patients too. You are a unique individual. I am not going to tell you that you should feel fine if you don't feel fine. If you don't feel fine, we're going to dig and figure out why, and then move forward with a plan. So my basic message to you today, this is a short one. Just don't get too hung up and caught up and psychologically roped in to what your numbers say, especially those antibody numbers, because I know you guys look at those. And although we want them at 0, little fluctuations are fine. Little fluctuations are fine in your A1C. Little fluctuations are fine in your insulin. It's going to give us feedback as to whether you've been like cheating a little bit too much or not, but little fluctuations are fine. Do not hang your hat on your numbers. Go by how you feel.